Hey, History Seeking here. Today we shall take a tour of the surviving keep at Stafford Castle. It was originally built by timber in 1100 AD, upgraded to stone in 1347, till its final desertion in the 1950s. Let's take a look at the Stafford Castle trailboard. Stafford Castle was constructed in the late 11th century by the conquering Normans and became the family seat of the de Staffords. Its complex defences cover an area of 14 acres. The castle consists of an oval mound called a Mott, 2 baileys or enclosures, packed with buildings and a settlement beyond, all of which were surrounded by ditches and high banks, surmounted by timber defences. The man-made Mott lies at the northwest edge of a natural ridge. The position was the most easily defended, while also providing the best vantage point. Extending eastwards from the Mott are 3 enclosures, each forming a gently sloping terrace. The defences for the inner bailey are the strongest and dominate the larger outer bailey. The 3rd enclosure was the settlement. The castle trail is 1.07 metres, is broadly arranged as a walk through time and follows the history for the castle from the late 11th century to the present day. Each board includes a route map, an illustration based on documentary and archaeological evidence, and an explanation of the image. Here in the wood is some beautiful carvings. The guitar seat says, "Blackbirds singing in the dead of night," and the squirrel is carved into a seat, which is fantastic. Let's take a look at the Woodland trailboard. This area, now known as the Castle Wood, was once part of Stafford's Great Park, within the vast local estate belonging to the Stafford family. In the Norman and early medieval period, it was not wooded but laid out as a lawn or pasture land for grazing deer and other animals, whilst the area to the northwest was enclosed as a deer park, first mentioned in 1284. By the late medieval period, Stafford Castle had lost its military significance and was considered a high-status baronial manor house. The deer parks were an important part of this estate, providing sport in the form of hunting and providing food for the table. When Edward Stafford, the 3rd Duke of Buckingham, was executed for high treason in 1521, the castle was fortified to Henry VIII. An inventory carried out for the king describes the park as having a boundary 3 miles long, which contained 400 deers. The Great Park fell out of use in 1735, and by 1788, the area in which we are in was known as the Hop Yard. In 1783, Sir William Jerningham instructed Thomas Barnaby to landscape the castle grounds, which were made available as a public park from this time. The estate was run on a commercial basis. Between 1828 and 1832, the Hop Yard was planted with 3,800 trees, although felling had taken place at various times over the following century. The site was clear-felled in 1948 to 1949. In the 1950s, it was replanted with birch, beech and sycamore trees. The Woodland Trail follows the traditional route, used by ramblers and dog walkers. Since the area was replanted in the 1950s, at approximately 1 mile long, the path is a circular walk, clockwise in direction. The Castle Trail starts at the southern limits of the Outer Bailey, adjacent to its junction with the settlement site. Here a gap in the bailey's defence banks probably represents the site of a postern gate, providing direct access from the castle to the main medieval road to Newport, Shropshire, and to the medieval manors of Hindley and Bradley. A single portal gateway beneath a timber tower set back into the Outer Bailey, and therefore tunnelling potential attackers into a narrow area from where they could be attacked from 3 sides and from above. From here the trail follows the line of the heavy silted Outer Bailey ditch, with the ramparts which were crowned by timber palisade, with fighting platforms to the left. To the left of the postern gate is the modern drive which cut through the edge of the Outer Bailey and spirals up the east face of the Mott to the keep. So let's take a look at the Mott ditch and inner bailey board. The view shows the southern east side of the Mott and the western defence of the inner bailey. This portion would have been the junction of 3 ditches. The Mott, the Inner Bailey and the Outer Bailey ditches. Any vulnerable or dead ground would have been covered by arches from the Bailey, the Mott and the counterscarp defences. The deep ditches dividing the Mott from the Inner Bailey today. The modern road covers the site of the infield Mott ditch. The defences to the Inner Bailey include a palisade with hoarding towers all defended with arrow slits and loopholes. Within the palisade, on top of the Mott, a larger timber hall, to the rear of which lies a 3-storey timber keep. The Mott was constructed using material obtained from the ditch cutting. Built up on top was already a high ridge, overlooking the pre-castle site. The ditch itself was well maintained and was cleaned out regularly to preserve its depth and steepness. It was always a dry ditch and not a water-filled moat, although its clay lining meant that rainwater would collect in the bottom, making it slippy and more difficult to cross. Let's take a look at the Inner Bailey board. Whatever structures lay on the summit of the Mott, the space would have been confined and limited, which created the need for a bailey or defended enclosure to provide additional accommodation. Stafford Castle was unusual in that it had 2 large baileys and a defended settlement beyond. This position provides a good view over the Inner Bailey of 2.83 acres, where the domestic buildings of the castle were situated. From the gateway in the southeast corner, the ground rose in 3 main terraces towards the Mott, while the infield Mott ditch followed the line of the modern road. The Inner Bailey was where the routine daily life of the castle took place. At its centre would have been an open courtyard, where the well was located, and where women and children would perhaps have congregated. Around it and backing onto the palisade would have been ranges of buildings, including halls, chambers, a chapel, kitchen and a brewhouse, storehouses, granaries and stables among them. Let's take a look at the stone keep board. In 1521, Edward Stafford, 3rd Duke of Buckingham, was executed and the castle fortified to Henry VIII, who was told by his commissions that the castle is property by laid, all uniform and of faction, devised in length without ye courte, and at either ende 2 tors and on in Midas, upon corbels, the hall settle on height in the Midas, adjourning thereunto at the over end a great chamber, and under the hall at the nether end is the kitchen and larger house, and directly under the hall is the buttery and pantry, not well devised for want of particons, and directly under the great chamber is the cellar. When it came to the castle's general state of repair, it was reported that this said castell hath a good roof covered thoroughly with lead, how it be then rin, be main defaults, and also in the floors, and world be better pointed, and filled with lime, which welder in worn away. The picture shows the southern aspect of the keep as it may have looked. Stafford Castle has a prominent vantage point and a strategic location which the Normans recognised quickly. The huge timber fortress was built in 1100 AD by Robert de Tourney, later known as Robert of Stafford, on behalf of William the Conqueror. Unfortunately, all the traces of the wooden buildings have now gone, but the earthwork banks and ditches can still be seen. After recent restoration work and a programme of archaeological investigation, Stafford Castle is considered one of the best surviving examples of Norman earthworks in the country. Today the castle is run by the local authority and is home to a programme of events throughout the summer months. A prominent place in the Staffordshire Festival Shakespeare each year. Let's take a look at the Gothic Reconstruction Board in 1825 AD. Following the Civil War in 1642 to 1649, Stafford Castle remained in the ruined state until the Jerningham family of Norfolk, the heirs apparent to the barony, cleared the site and rebuilt the east wing on the foundations of the 14th century structure. The keep represents an early and important example of Gothic revival architecture. In 1950, the castle still held by the Stafford barony and occupied by the caretakers, Mr. and Mrs. Stokes, were finally abandoned due to its degeneration, which was further hastened by subsequent neglect and vandalism. In 1962, following the death of a teenager during a partial collapse of the building in the previous year, the upper portions of the keep were demolished for reasons of public safety. In 1978, Stafford Council embarked upon a major archaeological project, and 10 years later, and the castle was officially opened to the public by the Right Honourable the Lord Stafford and Morag Lady Stafford. At the foot of the castle, a purpose-built visitors centre houses a reproduction arms and armour detail, model reconstructions of the Norman Moat and Bailey Castle, and an interpretation of a guard room in a 12th century timber fortress. The castle and grounds are open from April till October in the summer months, 11 AM till 4 PM, Wednesday to Sunday. In the winter months, November to March, 11 till 4, at the weekends only. It's free to visit. There is a donation box in the visitors centre and the parking is free. There is access for disabled people in the visitors centre and up to the keep, but please bear in mind it is a very steep hill. enjoyed Stafford Castle as much as we did, do take care and have a fantastic weekend.